David Keith is leading research into a drastic measure to turn down the global thermostat. It's called solar geoengineering. The idea, inject large quantities of sulfur dioxide, or maybe another aerosol, into the stratosphere using high-altitude aircraft. This should lower global temperatures by reflecting sunlight away from our planet. It sounds like an idea hatched by a James Bond villain, and David Keith is keenly aware of that.
Geoengineering seemed like a bit of a crazy idea, but there was a taboo, and I think taboos are unhealthy, and my view is we should understand it better to see just how crazy it really is.
Indeed, he's been exploring this idea since 1989, and over the years, it's made him a bit of a scientific pariah.
Senior colleagues would tell me this would ruin my career, or people would kind of want to move away from me in the elevator. This topic was just toxic, and the mainstream climate science community just didn't want to talk about it.
He may not have had scientists on his side, but nature has been running solar geoengineering experiments for millions of years in the form of volcanic eruptions. When the really big ones blow, they launch sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, 6 to 30 miles above us.
It gradually turns into aerosols. It turns into small droplets, liquid droplets of sulfuric acid. And those droplets reflect away sunlight. And that reflection of sunlight cools the climate. And we see that after big volcanic eruptions.
When Mount Pinatubo blew its top in 1991, global temperatures cooled 1 degree Fahrenheit over the subsequent 15 months. David Keith thinks humans can do the same.
If we decide to maintain the taboo and not have a serious research program, then what we give to our kids is ignorance. And they'll still make decisions, but they'll make decisions without knowing.
Maybe that's why the snicker factor is starting to fade.
We're not going to limit the risks of climate change to even reasonably safe levels by reducing emissions from burning fossil fuels alone.
Climate scientist Peter Frumhoff is Director of Science and Policy at the Union of Concerned Scientists.
And so therefore, we're looking at a whole range of hard choices about how to pull carbon dioxide potentially out of the atmosphere at scale, and maybe, just maybe, to begin to think about mimicking volcanoes by injecting reflecting particles into the stratosphere. That's a terrible idea, but people are beginning to give it some attention.
Yeah, it's really changing. Suddenly, many more of the kind of environmental leadership and sort of science policy thought leadership take this seriously. It really feels very different even from a year ago.
But the devil, as always, lurks in the details. One of the big questions, could it make the climate worse in some places, better in others?
It has all kinds of unclear ramifications. We don't know what the regional changes in rainfall patterns might look like.
That's just one of the possible unintended consequences of solar geoengineering. Other questions? How would it affect agriculture? How would any aerosol interact with the gases already present in the stratosphere? And could there be some unwelcome byproducts? That's what David Keith and his colleague Frank Koich are trying to determine. In the lab, they are testing various aerosols to see how they might behave in the stratosphere. Sulfur dioxide may be a good reflector, but it also reacts with and reduces the ozone layer and causes acid rain. So they are considering alternatives. The leading contender, calcium carbonate.
These calcium carbonate particles certainly will not have the same chemistry as these concentrated sulfuric acid particles. What we don't know is how do they actually react, because it could be that they react even worse.
To find out, they're planning an atmospheric experiment called ScopeX.